Hello. Let's discuss some interesting and rather different type of endgames. What I want to start with is when white has king and a rook only, and black has king and pawn or pawns. Let's start with some very simple position. Simple position, suppose white's king on a7, black's king on e4, white's rook on b7, and black's pawn on f4. We know that this position is, we should know that this position is easy draw for black. What black has to do, just push this pawn accompanied by the king, black's king, and white will not be able to stop this pawn except for sacrificing rook for pawn, which will be a draw. However, this position is not even close for white to win. However, your king can be close enough to make position winning. Example, this position, well, white's king on c4, white's rook on a7, black's king on e4, pawn on f4. If white to move, this position is winning. You need to get with white king in front of the pawn. The way you do that, you give check, king f3, king d3, and after king g2, you simply winning by giving rook g7 check, king f2, king d2, and eventually you win the f pawn. Example, f3, rook f7, king g2, king e3. This is very elementary and almost any chess player can do. Much more difficult problem is to stop when you have king and a rook and your opponent has two connected pass pawns. Those are the positions we wanted to discuss now. There is no general rule there. Every position with every different position of the pawn and every position of the king can make difference in outcome of the game. That's why there are no general rules apply, except for you have to try to stop the pawns, but this you will know anyway. So let's get one very interesting position. You playing white and you have king on c5 and pawns on d5 and e6. Black has king on h1 and rook on e1. Now this position is easily won for white. What white has to do, white has to promote one of these pawns to queen, and even if you sacrifice another pawn, then it's going to be one endgame, queen versus rook. So the way to win this position is to play king to d6 and then play e7, king d7, and e8. This is the way to win this position. But bad way to play this position is d6. Now this move looks like the easiest way to win, but this is a draw. It may seem like a very good move because if black plays rook takes e6, white goes d7, and then white is going to win by making queen next move. And black can't stop this pawn because on rook e5 check, now white wisely has to play king c4, not king d4 because of rook e1 and rook d1 check. King c4, rook e4 check, king c3, rook e3 check, king d2, and white wins. So if white wins here, why is d6 bad move? This is the move that does not win because Black does not play rook takes e6, which loses. But black has in between check rook e5, and now no matter where white king moves, black can play rook takes e6 next move with very easy draw. If king goes forward, then rook takes e6 and rook takes d6 next move. But if black comes back, white comes back with the queen, then rook takes e6 and pawn can't move. So this would be a draw. So this is the position where you have to be careful, and the easiest way to win is king d6, and after king g2, either e7 or maybe even king to e7. This may be even better move, followed by d6, d7, and d8. You make a queen and you win the game easily. Now, another position which may seem like a lost position for white, but white amazingly saves. This is very interesting position. White has king on h5, rook on c1, and black has king on d8, and two pawns on e2 and d4. Now this position looks, with white to move, looks like white has to play king g4, d3, king f3, but then after d2, white looks totally lost. Now, can white save this position? Yes, there's one very unusual and very wise way to save this game. White has to play king g4, after d3, king f3, and after d2, white has the move that will save the game. The move is rook to c8 check, and after this move, you can see that it's an easy draw. White gets both black pawns. King takes c8, king takes e2. This is also little unusual approach to rook versus pass pawns. So, general rules, when you have king and rook versus pass pawns, if you have a rook, you have to try, the general rule, you have to try to stop them, you have to try to block them, and if you can't, you have to try to sacrifice rook for at the appropriate moment to secure a draw. And by normal means, sometimes it doesn't work. So you have to find some unusual ways of drawing, and this is one of them. Now, these unusual positions sometimes happen also in a very, very common bishop endings or knight endings, when we have general rules, general patterns, but however we have some exceptional tactical ways, unorthodox ways of winning the game when it seems like draw, or drawing the game when it seems like lost. Example, I will give you the simple position of opposite color bishops ending, which normally we can, discuss for hours and hours. Opposite color bishop ending is a very wide subject. Here is the position: white's king on a1, bishop on f6, and black's king on b5, pawns on a3, b3 with bishop on e6. This position is draw if it's white's move, and this position is lost if black is on the move. Black's idea to win this endgame, obviously by putting the king on c2 and playing b2, mating white or promoting the queen. Obviously black cannot play b2 before king comes to c2, because white simply sacrifices the bishop for 2 pawns and a draw. So how can white draw this? You have to notice that if black plays a2, then it's an easy draw. But black will never play this move voluntarily. So if white tries to force a2 move, then as soon as bishop leaves the b2 square, control of b2 square after bishop e7, then black plays b2 and makes the queen after king b1, bishop f5, check. So one and the only way to draw this position is by playing king b1. You see, that's why white needs the move. If it was black's move, black would have played bishop f5, and white will never have a chance to play king b1. Now, but if we play king b1 and black plays check, now white goes king c1, and this is very well known drawish position. Now white just plays this bishop on long diagonal, and black has no ways of making progress. Whatever black tries, white stands here. King cannot come to support b2 move. a2 will never win because of the blockade, and b2 is impossible to support. Now the interesting position, I just said that if white plays a2, black plays a2, white goes king b2. Well, this is very obvious that this position is a draw, regardless that black has 2 extra pawns. But now the interesting thing here, what if black has 3 pawns? Is this a win? Now this is a draw, but this is much more difficult. White has to know only one rule. The rule they have to know is they cannot stay on b2 with a king forever. White's king must stand on a1. Now why on a1 and not on b2? Well, we can't stand on b2 for now. But then black goes king c5, white stands on with a bishop and waits. So black will play king e4, king d5, king e4, and king d3. And now you have to be careful, because if you don't play king a1, you will lose. Actually, the interesting thing about this position that black can win this position or draw this position without this bishop, without bishop on e6. Bishop on e6 does not help black at all. So the rules I'm going to show you now will apply with bishop or without. This bishop is totally worthless now. If it's black's move in this position, black wins easily by playing c3 check, bishop takes to c3, a1 check, king takes a1, and king takes c3. So this is a draw. This is lost, obviously, for white. But the draw is white must play king a1 here. And now you can see that black cannot make any progress. Because if they play c3 now, then we play bishop takes c3, and when black recaptures, it will be a stalemate position. On the other hand, black can make no progress without playing c3. So which means black can make no progress. So this position, you're better off standing with king on a1 and playing just the dark square bishop. But this position is a simple draw. So those are little bit difficult, little bit unusual rules that you apply in opposite color bishops endings, or rook versus pass pawns we just saw. And I can show you several different examples of using not very common rules in different endgames. We looked at position where rook is fighting versus one or versus two connected pass pawns. Now let's look at a few positions and let's get basics of the position where rook is fighting versus three connected pawns. Let's give this example. White king on g4, rook on b1, and black has king on g6 and pawns on f6, g5, h4. Now, in this position, white to move. And this is a win. The way white wins this, white simply blocks by playing rook f1 or rook b5. White blocks black's f pawn. Now king has to move, then white plays king f5, and then rook goes around, and white wins all three black pawns. So, because if black h pawn moves, they're going to lose the pawn right away. Otherwise, if king moves, then rook a1 followed by rook a6, and an easy win for white. This is elementary position. However, if white king is on g2 and rook on a and f1, and black has king on g4 and pawns on f4, g3, h2. Now this position is a little more complicated. It's a little more complicated because you have to know some ground rules here. If it's black's move, black wins. It's interesting, we discussed position where bishop was against three connected pass pawns, and when just discussed the white king has to stay in a corner. This is exactly the same rule we apply to this. In this position, if it's black's move, black wins. By playing f3 check, rook must take on f3, and now h1 check, king takes on h1, king takes on f3, king g1, g2. Black wins. However, if white's move, then white has a draw. So the way you draw, you go king h1. And now black cannot make any progress, because after f3, you simply play rook takes f3. And after king takes f3, it's a stalemate. And if black plays king h3, now white plays rook f3, and black has nothing better than repeat the position, which will lead to a draw. So you see the rule which we had with the bishop in a bishop ending, well, when pawns were on a2, b3, c4, black pawns, and white king was on b2 with dark square bishop, are the same. King has to stay on a1. And in the position we just looked, we see that king has to stay on h1. Same stalemating idea helps us even if we have a rook or the bishop. We know, or we should know, that most of the rook endings where one side has two pawns, two extra pawns, or would it be better to say if we have rook and two pawns versus rook, over 90% of these positions are winning. Now I want to show you one interesting position. White king on e4 and the rook on h1. Black pawn on a6, no, rook, king on e4, rook on h1, and pawns on a6 and e5, and black has king on e6 and rook on a8. This position is very easily won for white, and white has many ways to win this position. Ways are, white can play rook h6 check, followed by rook d6 and then penetrate with a king, or white can play rook a1, probably the easiest way to win. So everything wins, but why do we look at this position? Maybe white can simply play a7, and if black takes on a7, then white has rook h6 check, followed by rook h7 check, and recapture the rook. This is the one of the bad ways to play for white. Now, after rook takes a7, this is a draw, because if white plays rook h6 check, king e7, now only way to try, and after rook h7 now, black has king e6 move. And you see the unusual idea in endgame, if white recaptures black's rook, white captures black's rook, this will be a stalemate position. This a7 move is a bad blunder. So this is unusual idea in rook endings. Now when we study rook endings, and we will discuss rook endings in all details, we cannot apply this idea as one of the main principles of how to play rook ending. No, if you want to apply main principles of rook ending, then you would play rook a1. And main principles say always keep your rook behind your pass pawn. But you may say, hey, a7 may be even faster and quicker and easier way to win. But then rook takes a7 and black has a lucky way out. Now this position is not winning. Now we can get another position which is just as tricky as this one. Here is a position which can be very interesting. White king on b8, pawn on a7, and knight on b3, with black king on e7 and bishop on h1. Now, you see that bishop is stopping white pawn, and white has a plan to win here, but let's see if it's going to work. Now this position, the result will be win for white if it's white's move, and it's a draw if it's black's move. Let's see how. If it's white's move, white wins easily because they go knight c5 or knight a5, followed by knight b7 and making the queen. It's very simple. However, if it's black's move, black has a way to draw this game. Black plays king d8, and now when white plays knight c5 or a5, black has move which draws. The move is bishop to a8, and now in order to make progress for white, they have to take the bishop. Now if in this position is black's move, black loses because black is in Zugzwang. Black has to move the king, after which white can take the bishop and come out with the king, or move the bishop, which will follow by knight b7 and a8 queen. However, it's a white's move, and white does not have a good move here. So after king takes a8, there is a rule that king has to go on the color of square where knight is, which is king c7, and we get theoretically drawish position. This bishop a8 move is also unusual, not typical for endgame positions. So in order to be a good endgame player, you have to know all the basic rules. And there are many basic rules for different endgames, which we will all discuss in this series of endgame tapes. So you have to know all general rules, main principles. Also, you have to be well aware that there's a lot of tactics and combinations in endgames. Some people may wrongly think that, oh, the combinations and tactics are mostly in middle games. That's not so. Unusual ideas, very interesting and subtle ways to play, there are in end games just as well as in middle games. This is just another example of this position. Let's look at one highly unusual position of pawn endgame. We did not cover it in pawn endgame tape because it's not typical for pawn endings. However, it is pawn ending. Well, white king on a2 and pawns on g2 h5, with black king on d5 and pawns on g7 f6. White to move. It looks totally hopeless for white because black's king is 3 tempos ahead of white's, and both pawns g2 and h5 are vulnerable. However, this position is a draw. This is the amazing result that white can make to black's pawns just as fast as black makes to white pawns. It sounds not realistic, but this is a draw. So the move is king b3. And now black has to choose their plan. Plan is this. Black can come by playing king d4 towards g2 pawn, or black can go towards h5 pawn. Both tries for black will lead to a draw. Let's look at them. King d4. Now white goes king b4. King to e3, and black gets to g2 pawn. King e3 is one try, and f5 is the other try. We can look at both of these continuations. King e3, king c5. Now after king f2, white goes king d6, and after king g2, white goes king e6, and this is an easy draw because after king g3, king f7, you can see that black cannot win. This is very simple. Okay, so maybe black can do better after king d4, king b4 by playing f5. This is another interesting try, but also insufficient for winning. White goes king b5, and now after king e3, king c5, king f2, king d5. Also a draw after king takes g2, king e5, and black has to be very careful, but if they play king g3 and king h4, it's still a draw. So this is the second way we tried for black and they cannot win. Now let's try after king b3 with the black's king to go to h pawn. Then white uses an unusual method of which is based on black king's bad position. After king e5, king c4, king f5, king d5, king g5, king e6. And after king takes h5, if white goes king f7, they will lose after king h6. However, white plays king f5, and this is very simple draw. Now black's move, and black has only two moves. G pawn cannot move because white will take on f6, and black has only two moves, either king h4 or king h6, and both moves lead to a draw. After king h4, king g6 is a simple draw, and after king h6, white plays g4, forcing king h7, and after g5, f takes g5, king takes g5. It's theoretically drawish position. So if we used just basic rules without any calculation, we could say that this position has to be lost because there is no outside pass pawns, neither side has pass pawns, and both of white pawns can be picked up, either one of white pawns, which will give black extra pawn in pawn ending, normally sufficient to win the game. I have another position. It's also rook versus two connected pass pawns. But this is the case where white has no way to stop black's pass pawns. That's why I did not discuss this ending together with other ending where rook plays against two pass pawns. Here, white rook on b1, king on f6, and black king on e8, and pawns on f2 and g3. White has to draw this game. Now black is threatening g2 and g1. There is no way white's king can help stopping these pawns. And rook cannot stop these pawns by itself, because after rook f1 is g2. So white uses the way of called counterplay, when white plays king e6, threatening mate, which will not allow black to play g2 and make queens. But black can run with king d8. Now white plays king d6, threatening mate again. Black goes king c8, and now white gives rook c1 check. This is the drawish position. Now if black goes king d8, white will simply repeat position, so king b7, and white goes rook b1 check. Now black has to come up king a6. And white continues threatening mate. So white has to be very persistent here not to let black to push g2. And if black goes king a5, king c5, king a4, king c4, this is a draw, unless black tries to win too hard. If black does that, they will lose. King a3, king c3, and white continues to getting mate threats. Now black has to go back, king a4, king c4, and white will threaten mate perpetually. However, if black plays king a2, that's where white wins. Now white has very unexpected move, rook to f1, after which black can resign immediately. Now black has two legal moves. One is g2, then white takes rook takes f2 check, and rook takes g2 and wins easily, or king a3, and then white mates with rook a1. So that's now we can tell that black is overdid it and they lost the game. So the correct move after king c3 should have been king a4, king c4, king a5, king c5, and this is a draw. So we just saw an example of very interesting defense for white. They found the mating net and kept following, chasing black's king all around the board, and that's what saved the game for white. Now let's look at some other example. Here is the position. We're going to set up white king on f4, rook on e1, and bishop on b2, black's king on f6, and rooks on e8 and e7, and pawn on e6. Now this pattern is well known for more experienced chess players. Black's king is in check. Black has winning material advantage. They have rook and a pawn for a bishop. The correct way to play this position to go king f7, and slowly rooks will come out, and it will require some time. Eventually black is going to win this game with correct play. What is wrong with a move like e5 check? It's more active move, because if white plays king e4, then well, black will play rook a8 or rook b8 followed by rook b4 or rook a4 and rook a8 and rook a4, and black should win also. And white looks like cannot take because black has 3 defenses. However, e5 is a bad mistake which will cost black half a point. After e5, the game is drawn. White plays rook takes e5, black takes rook takes e5, and here is a very strange position, and maybe one of a kind. White will not recapture the rook because they will lose after rook takes e5. What white will do here, just simply play bishop d4 or bishop c3 somewhere on this diagonal, but without capturing the rook. And now we can see that black can make no progress at all to win this position. And what kind of progress they can make? If rook moves from e-file, away from e-file, then white simply will play bishop takes e-file, and we will get theoretically well-known drawing position. If black rook goes on e-file, e8 and e7, on e6, then white maneuvers its bishop back and forth to a1 to d4 diagonal. Meanwhile, black's king cannot go anywhere because then white will recapture this rook on e5, and we get the same theoretically known drawing position. So this is very unusual draw where one bishop fights against 2 rooks successfully, and this is a draw. That's another way of creative defense and bad mistake for black playing e5 check in that position. So another position I want to show you is also very interesting. It's a rook and bishop for one side and rook for the other side. Now we are not going to discuss this endgame in details. I want to show you only one particular part of this endgame that is can be we refer to for seeing very unusual and creative defense for the underdog side, king and rook. So king and rook versus king, bishop and rook is known as draw position with exact play for side that has piece down. And there are certain rules you have to apply, which is not simple. I know many examples when even grandmasters lost this position. One, in addition to one very well-known pattern where rook has to stay in behind, which we're not going to discuss now, there is another pattern to put king on d7 for black and rook on b7. And this is the kind of fortress position to create, and hoping that white with king on d5, bishop on c5, and rook somewhere on h1 can make no progress. White really cannot make any progress here. However, white has number of tries, and we're going to discuss them now. As you can see, if white makes waiting moves, suppose like rook h2, black has to maintain this position without moving rook out of the way and without running with the king some different direction. But however, they can play king c7 and king d7, or rook c7 and rook b7. They just have to make just one move. So let's see king c7 move. Can white make any progress on bishop d6 check, king d7? And there is no progress can be noticed here, because on rook h7 check, king c8, and white has made no progress. Rook h8 check, king d7. And on bishop c5, still king c7. Position, we're going around the circles. But the try that white may attempt here to play rook h2, and after king c7 or rook c7, suppose after king c7 to play rook h6. Black goes king d7 and bishop b6. It may seem like black is in trouble, but that's where comes the unusual defense for black. Suppose black goes rook b8. That's a bad and clearly losing move, because after rook h7 check, king c8 and king c6, black can resign right now. But bishop b6 does not get white anywhere if black plays king c8 move, and white can make no progress here. Next move, black wants to place king d7, and there is no progress for white to be made. Let's try rook h8 check, king d7, position repeated. On king c6 move, threatening mate, black has lucky rook c7 check defense. And you see, if white captures this rook, then it's a stalemate position. So king has to retreat, or d5 or b5, and the same song starts all over and over again. If white plays rook d6, trying rook d8 mate, then after rook d7, that's an instant draw. So this is not a typical defense when you try for stalemate, but for this position, it's crucial and very important. That's what helps black to maintain their outpost on these positions, and they maintain their fortress. So after king c8, king c6, the unusual defense that I want you to notice is rook to c7 check. So I don't think we can draw one main line here and say, oh, in such and such positions there are such and such unusual defenses. No, that you have to be aware of the patterns and the ideas of the defenses that may occur in one or some other endgame positions, and be aware of them, whether you use it or make sure your opponent doesn't use them on you. So play around them, or use them when you can use them to your own benefit. Thank you very much.